Well, I too am thankful for the pastoral search team. Thank you guys for picking me. This church literally checked every box as we're searching the globe for what's next for us. And just thank you I know it's a lot of work to search and all these applicants, and I know it's very stressful. But we say thank you just for our family. Thank you for inviting us into your family here at this church. So if you want to know why this church checked off every box for us, just invite us over for dinner. We just want to eat your food, and you can hear the story. We can just listen to you talk. It's been so fun hearing your stories and how God has been working in your lives. But we love food, so keep inviting us, because it's going to take forever to get to know the church, right? With COVID, and we just can't hang out with everybody. So I feel like we know 8 families really well, and we want to branch out of that. But this morning, thank you for being here. And we have a lot this morning, and we're going to get back into our story of Joseph and where we left off. But just want to give you an insight on my southern adventures. So this last week, as I'm learning, as a guy from the Northwest, right? So Joseph and Holly were just up in the Northwest, so they got a taste of kind of where we're from. And this last Tuesday, I showed up in our church parking lot, and there's this older gentleman. He's looking at a pothole, this famous pothole right out here, right? So he's looking at it. And I get out and I say, "Hey, good morning, I'm Mark. Are you here to fix the pothole?" And so sometimes older gentlemen can have a great sense of humor, so I was braced for this guy to be funny. And so I looked at him, and he looked down, and he said, "Well, Mark," he said, "do you know where this pothole came from?" He said, this thing has been here for a long time, and it's probably what's left over of a whale. I said, that is my kind of humor. Like, this is the blowhole, right? Like prehistoric beluga blubber, like under the earth. Like, this is where life came out. It's down there. I'm like, dude, you are hilarious. I'm from the Northwest. Like, I can do artsy-fartsy instantly. Like, I get you. But I'm looking at him. This guy's just being deadpan serious, and I'm laughing. I'm like, why is this guy not laughing? Because that was really funny. Then I learned that whale is Southern for well. See, but sometimes we get lost in translation, right? I thought we're on the same page, and I'm like in a completely different world from this guy. Because whale, where I grew up, has a blow spout, and there's blubber, all right? They're in the ocean. So, and probably for some of you, maybe this last week, you thought you were on the same page with someone in communication, but maybe you were completely in a different branch. And this happens to me a lot, especially here in the South. I catch myself all the time just being in a different page of people. But maybe today, if English is your second language, it's very intimidating. It is a difficult struggle to adapt in a culture where this is not your native language. I know, Olivia, when you moved here, 17 years ago, it's intimidating to get here and not know the language. And sometimes we feel like we need to retreat and just be home because we get embarrassed to even have conversations because we feel like we're digging ourselves into this pit and we almost don't want to come out because we might be even more embarrassed. And so we're going to get back into the story of Joseph. We're going to talk about rejection, and maybe some of you this week, you faced rejection, and you saw maybe the nasty side of rejection, or maybe you used rejection like last week in a positive way because God equips us with the means to reject certain things from the world. And so this series of rejection, we're a few weeks in here into the series as we walk through the life of Joseph. And some of you might have this memorized, but I'm just going to do this again. If you know this, try to say this with me. So rejection is not ejection. It's just a change of direction. It can be God's way of protection. So rejection is not ejection. It's just a change of direction. It can be God's way of protection. And as we walk through the story of Joseph, I love this story. And there's so many heroes of mine in the scriptures, but Joseph he's up at the top. And so when I walk through the story, it's very personal because I love this story. But this morning, our one thing for today, one thing I want you to know as you walk out of here today is this, that if you are in a pit, then play a role. In a pit, play a role. Sometimes when we are in this pit of life, it's easy to get isolated and say, no, I don't want to venture out. I don't want to serve. I just want to stay home, and I don't want to go out and do things and use my hands. But sometimes when we're in a pit of life, God can get us out of that pit if we just play a role. And if we think past ourselves and we think how we can serve, not just in the church here, but in the community as well. So maybe this morning one of you feel like you're in a pit. Or if you're watching online, if you feel like you are in the pit of life, if you are fumbling in conversation and life is not flowing how you want it to, I want to encourage you, if you're not playing a role in God's story, then we'll give you a challenge later on of how you can actually play a role in God's story. So the series of rejection, we're going to dive in here. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 40 as we roll along, just one chapter today. And there's a lot. It's kind of a shorter chapter, but there's a lot of information in this. So I want to make sure this is very clear for us as we go through this morning, as we walk through Genesis chapter 40. Let me do this first. I want to pray for you. Jesus, thank you so much for this church, God. I thank you so much as I'm thinking about Nick and Katie DeMondes. I know Katie's fighting wars, just the battles of pregnancy and all the issues. Please heal her body. Have her be able to function well and have this pregnancy go super well to bring this kid into the world in December. God, I think about Pastor Randall. Give him clarity of thought this morning. Have him be able to deliver what you want him to deliver. Free his brain from the baggage of the world. And Jesus, have us focus. If there's someone here who is in a pit, the pit of life, help them to realize that sometimes when we serve, then God, you can relieve us from that pit. So thank you for the life of Joseph, God. I love this story. I thank you for how you used him. And Jesus, I pray this in your name. Amen. So if you weren't with us last week, just kind of a recap of Genesis chapter 38 and 39. So we had Judah, brother of Joseph, and Tamar. I know some people say Tamar. I say Tamar. It's like Tamar without the So his daughter-in-law was Tamar. And so she led him into a situation, and he gave in to temptation. He did things that they should not do, things that were reserved for marriage. I just realized the kids are out today. I can be a little more than just G, like last week. I could be a little more free. But it was really tough last week to walk through this. So then we see how God still worked through that. It's interesting to see how the lineage of Jesus went through Judah. And as I read this, I'm like, Jesus, why did you not choose the lineage to go through Joseph? Like, what a great model of who Christ is. We see the parallels in Joseph. But no, God chooses the lineage of Judah, this messed up guy. And in this, it's good to know that often the faithfulness of God is shown through the unfaithfulness of man. And we see this in the life of Judah. And God, you see the lineage of Jesus, it's full of these broken, fractured people that God still uses. So this morning, if you're sitting here, if you're watching online, you're like, man, there's no way God can use me. My past is messed up. God can still use you, and he loves you. And so keep that in mind. And also Joseph last week, as you know, he was faced with temptation. He was rising up in ranks because we know that he was popular. Okay, he was favored. His brothers rejected him. They sold him, so he goes in chains to live a new life in Egypt, and he's put in charge, and he had a lot of responsibility. And I love this because in the mess, he chose purpose over popularity, but in this mess, he discovered his purpose as God gave him a gift. He could interpret dreams, and God could speak to him through dreams. And then he gets into this, even in captivity, he plays his role in God's story. And he starts rising up in the ranks. He's given all this leadership responsibility. We don't see him saying, oh, woe is me. Oh, the victim card. We don't see this at all with the life of Joseph. He's just a good steward because he knows God, and God completely had changed his life. So we enter into the scene in Genesis chapter 40, where we are today, as we move on. And this is a crazy story. There are ups and downs, and later on we're going to highlight one of our awesome people here at our church and see how God is working in their life. But follow with me in Genesis chapter 40, starting in verse 1. It says this: sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. So these guys, the cupbearer and the baker, this is like they work for the secret service of Pharaoh. And so their duty as the cupbearer, his main responsibility was to make sure that the drink, maybe it's wine, whatever else it is, to make sure that is pure and that it's good. And so we don't know what happened. Maybe it was bad. Maybe there was a fly in it. We don't know what happened. But the baker, something went wrong as well. So the baker's chief responsibility was to make sure that the bread and the goods were all good. So we don't know if there was a rock found in the bread and he took a bite and all of a sudden a molar flopped out. We don't know what happened. We just know that these guys made a mistake and they're thrown into prison. Verse 2, Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. Now look at this. Joseph again, rising the ranks, but then he goes down and he's in prison. But we see when he's in this pit, he is playing a role. He's given responsibility, and he's leading even while in prison again. So this poor guy, all that he's been through, the mess that he's been through of life, he still plays a role. Now, I want you to think about this. Maybe this morning, if you're sitting here, if you just had a really rough week, let's say the world was against you. I know those of you in education, the wars you have to fight with all the, if it's on screen time or in person and mass and law enforcement, the battles that you have to fight. Sometimes we forget that when things are tough, God can use us still in a magnificent way through the battles and the pits that we're in. And I think about my wife and I have a friend, and she would come over all the time to our house in Oregon, and she was just in a pit. And so we'd say, well, you need to come to church with us this Sunday. And she'd say, I just don't feel like it because I'm in a pit. We'd say, well, the message this Sunday is going to be something from Scripture that's going to help you get out of that pit. But I don't feel like going. Well, could you at least come to this, youth event or whatever and get, biblical truth from a different angle with people that love you? Well, I don't feel like it because I'm in a pit. So at the church, we offer all these things to help people, right? And even ways to serve in the church to get them out of a pit. But it's so hard for people to take that next step. But we see Joseph at the bottom again, and he is still rising up in leadership in his prison. Let's go on to the rest of verse 4. And they had been in custody for some time. Verse 5, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. And each dream had a meaning of its own. In verse 6, when Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. Verse 7, so he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? What a question to ask these guys. Like, every one of us probably knows an optimist, right? Like, these people I can just picture like Joseph just skipping down the hallway of the prison, like jumping over these wet puddles. There's like rats scurrying. There's like a dim candle lit. He's just like, oh, it's another morning. What's up? He's so excited to go down. Like, oh, goes to their prison bars, and he looks in. He's like, guys, why are you so sad? Like, I don't know about you, but those people can bother me because I'm in a pit. Sometimes I want people just to be in the pit with me. You know what I mean? So here's Joseph, just roses and daisies and chewing on a lollipop and flying a kite down the hallway in the prison. Why do you look so sad today? Can you imagine their response? But it's interesting in his attitude, I really see so many parallels with the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Maybe some of you have heard of Bonhoeffer. Back in World War II, so he's a Christian in Germany, and so he, as a pastor, as a theologian, he actually joined the Nazi ranks because he wanted to go on the inside and think of a way how they could assassinate Hitler. And so Bonhoeffer goes in trying to brainstorm a way how they could take this guy out. And so he went in and they finally discovered, okay, this guy, they realized what he believes, and they put Bonhoeffer in prison. And I'm reading this book now. It's amazing. It's called Life Together by Bonhoeffer. And it's just his collection of thoughts about the fellowship of Christians, how important this is this morning as we gather together. And that you're tuning in this morning, that you can still kind of connect with us. But his attitude in prison was mind-blowing. There's this one English officer that said, after Bonhoeffer, who later on in life, he was executed right before Allied forces came to free them. He gets executed. But this English officer that was there was just saying that all he noticed about Bonhoeffer, how he was the guy ministering to other people. So we're talking about a pit of life, okay, being in a prison camp in Nazi Germany. And so he's in there, not saying, woe is me. He is using his ministerial gifts, you could say, to minister to other prisoners. So he's going around cell to cell. Hey guys, how can I pray for you? He's teaching the word of God. He's passing on biblical truth. And they said when he went to be executed, when he knew it was his day, right after he gave a sermon, they opened the doors and said, hey, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you're next. So as he walked down to his execution, they said that he went in there, and as he got his clothes off, they said that this executioner, he'd been doing this for 20 years, working in different prison situations. He says the first time he saw a man kneel down on his knees and just pray. But when he prayed with joy. He said, God, I'm going home soon. And with joy and this great attitude, he walked up and his life was ended. And I think about the life of Bonhoeffer and I see the life of Joseph. I'm like, this inspires me so much as a Christ follower, how our response would be when we are in a pit. Because it's easy just to wallow in our sadness and to just whine. But no, Joseph does not do this. So, let's see how they respond to chipper Joseph. Let's look at verse 8. They said, we both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. So the pagan religions of Egypt, they had magicians that would interpret the dreams. And so these guys are like, we don't have these magicians to go to now that can interpret our dreams. What are we going to do? Because dreams were a big deal back then. It's interesting how in this, we see in the Hebrew word of God, when Joseph said, hey, that's God's job, that belongs to him, Elohim is the word in Hebrew. And this, inside of Elohim, it's this idea of like supreme one, mighty one, overall creator. So even in prison, we see this evangelistic moment that he's saying, hey, your guys, whatever, they are they are here. Well, I know Elohim who is up here, the supreme one. He can do the work. Because Joseph, the temptation to be like, oh, I can interpret this dream. To gain points in the prison, you know what I mean? This was me. He says, no, Elohim, this is his job. Pointing all glory and power to God. Verse 9, so the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, in my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. Now, isn't it interesting? Most of our dreams have to do with our day, right? If you had a stressful day or your week or whatever your job is, sometimes those are the main things that we dream about. So this guy had a dream that lined up with his career. In verse 12, Joseph says this. He says, this is what it means. Joseph said to him, the 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand. So he's getting his job back, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me. Hello, when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. So he's just kind of saying, hey, I'm innocent. So, verse 16, when the chief baker, can you imagine this? Okay, this is the cupbearer, good outcome to his dream. So baker's over here sitting in there, looking over and thinking, oh man, I had a dream too. So he's getting pumped. So verse 16, when the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. Can you imagine, I picture this guy on his tippy toes. That was really good news to the cupbearer. Okay, I'm ready for mine. I'm ready for mine. Give it to me. I'm pumped. You know, if you've ever had a situation where you are so stoked to get good news, Like when you're sitting with someone and you're like not sure if you're talking on the same page. I remember on Lake Michigan in Chicago, when there's this beautiful girl in front of me, and we're having the DTR. So define the relationship, right? It's Mill, and we're sitting there on the beach. I'm like, are you into me? Because I think you're awesome. And finally, everything just opened up. And she said she's into me, and I'm thinking, this might be the one. And then, guys, you know how it is. We can't think straight. And like all logic just bypasses and floats up into the clouds, and we start twitching and turning purple. That was the moment for me. It's like this open clarity, good news, open doors. So this guy's pumped to receive good news. So he shared his dream in the end of verse 16. He said, on my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Okay, this is a strange dream. But here he is, okay, on his tippy toes in his cell. Like, let's go, like the tail is wagging, like little puppy mode right now, okay? He's super excited. And we see Joseph's response. Verse 18. Joseph, shooting straight, says this. This is what it means, Joseph says. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Yes, right? Maybe not the interpretation he was looking for. So on his tippy toes, waiting for this good news, he's in a pit, trying to figure out life, and Joseph just shoots straight and lets him know the bad news. You know, inside of this, I want you to think about 2 things. The first thing is that Joseph, he gave all glory to God, right? So any gifts that we have, that he has given us, we need to aim all glory to him. Because we can do nothing on our own. We can do nothing apart from him. It's interesting in this, he says the good news, what God told him, for the cupbearer. And with the baker, I just wonder how tempted Joseph was to be like, I'm going to twist this a little bit. Like, I'm going to candy sugarcoat this and just deliver this. This might be what it means. I could be off. But it's interesting, and your friends, I'm talking to you as Christ followers, and if you're a Christ follower tuning in online, for those of you who are Christians, and you can all think of someone who doesn't know Christ, and we are living in this grace age where we love to swim in grace all the time. But I tell you, in this, I see 2 different camps of delivery. I see this embrace of good news, but I see Joseph not shying away from the bad news. Because as Christ followers, sometimes we forget there actually is really bad news. So often we say, here's the gospel, here's the good news, here's the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And if that's not received, we say, well, we keep just pumping that love and that grace. Sometimes your friends need to hear the bad news. Sometimes people need to hear that there's the reality called hell, that there is this eternal separation from God that is not a fairy tale. And sometimes people need to hear that. And so as Christ followers, we're called to share the good news, but I think there's a season to share the bad news as well. I know today we're like, oh, we can't talk about that in sermons. We can't talk about hell. We can't talk about sin. Well, sometimes bad news is applicable. And sometimes we have to go there. So he shares the news. We go on to verse 20. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday. Woohoo! And he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so dream came true. So once again, he had put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But, verse 22, he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. In 23, the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Pit, life is tough. He's playing a role. He's serving. He requested, hey, guys, don't forget me. So we thought ADD was a new thing. It's not a new thing. They completely forgot him. They moved on. It's interesting in the story how the blessing on Joseph's life was not completely and all the time, it was not physical. You always want the blessing from God. We want this to pour out in our lives, and maybe sometimes it looks completely different than what we had imagined, because maybe God has a different plan for us, and it may not be very glamorous. It's interesting how God uses Joseph in so many different ways. Following Christ does not mean that we will be healthy, wealthy, and wise. It means you might see some pits in life. You might be in prison, maybe just physically, mentally, maybe actually in different ways. You might be in different modes of anxiety and depression and fill that mold. There are different pits that we can all be in. But it's interesting in this, the inspiration we get, that Joseph still played a role, even while in a pit. So here he is all alone. I'm sure he's still leading down in the prison. Maybe alone in his thoughts at night. I can't imagine what he's thinking. All alone probably thinking, God, why? Just why? Why me? I'm being faithful to you. I love you, and here I am again in this pit. But I think God had him there for intentionality. God had him there for a purpose, to be in that prison. So two guys get out, and they forget him. So poor Joseph. But I love how he plays a role. And you can hear me say this a lot, and you're hearing our different vocabulary. Sammy did a great job today on unwrapping what our vision is for you. And I just want to take a minute to explain what this looks like. So we want you to go through a thing called On Track. Well, On Track is this. On Track is a first 4 Sunday of the month discipleship-making vision that we're going to walk through here to church. And we want all of you, how many of you? How many of you? So we want all of you to go through this, you online as well, to walk through this process, just because we want you to know God. We don't want you to just know about God. So week 1, that first Sunday, I'm going to facilitate a course. It's called Know God. We want you to know the plan of salvation. We want you to know what our church believes in our articles of faith. We want you to know how our church structure works, maybe a glimpse behind the curtain of finances as well. That will be the first Sunday. We will repeat this for 10 months out of the year. So once you all go through, then this is something we can have for new people that come to the church. Hey, you start with On Track. And session number 2 is we want you to find freedom. Freedom is found in Christ, but we still have some baggage of our past, right? Well, we believe that freedom is found, that God gives us, he wants us to be in a small group environment where we can learn how to study the Bible and have accountability. And so Brandon and Sammy and Gretchen are going to facilitate week 2 for that. And then the third week is we want you to discover your purpose. Like Joseph, he realized that God gave him a gift. Everybody in here, if you're a Christ follower, you have at least one spiritual gift. And so Reese and Emily are going to facilitate week 3 to let you know what is our purpose as worshipers, to live a life of sacrifice. And also, we want you to know what is your spiritual gift. We'll give you an assessment. Also, the DISC behavioral assessment, we'll have you walk through that as well. That's week 3. And then week 4, we want you to play a role. Play a role. So now serve in this big story that God has orchestrated. We want you to play a role in God's story. And so Allison and Brittany will facilitate week 4 and just walk you through what are our serve opportunities in our church. What are our expectations of you as a leader at On Mission Church? And then they will dispatch you to ministry leads from there. We will continue this. We'll take December and July off, but continue this as far as we can. This is our discipleship-making vision, which really pioneers out of the life I see in Joseph. So we're going to live it here at our church. There's someone here at our church that models this really well. I just want to take a few minutes, and we might go a little bit over time today, but that's okay. Allison might have other words to say about that. But this morning, we have something special. So Savannah, can you just come up front today? You guys make some noise for Savannah. Savannah and her husband, Sean Davis, and Haley and Jade, right, are your girls? Yeah. And so I don't see them today, but maybe if you're tuning online, hi, girls. So I just want you to hear just a snapshot of Savannah's story. And we don't have 4 hours this morning to go through her story. She gave me the tip of the iceberg a few days ago on the phone. But I see so many parallels of the story of Joseph with Savannah. So Savannah, hey, thanks for being here.
I'm going to scoot up a little
You can
closer
scoot.
because I feel
You can
a
scoot.
little
That's
weird.
fine. Yeah, that's all good. Savannah, just give them. A lot of them know you. I'm the new guy. I don't. So this is maybe more for me and for my wife. But just kind of tell them just a walkthrough of your story and your journey, and then how you ended up here at On Mission Church.
All right. Yeah. So I've been through a whole lot. My whole life has not ever been picture perfect. I grew up in church, but my parents never really played it out at home. It was always churches for Sunday, and during the week we do other things. So with that, both of my parents were drug addicts and alcoholics, and so I kind of grew up watching what I didn't want, and I feel like I rebelled and did everything I could to not end up that way, which is really kind of backwards for a lot of people end up doing whatever. So, I started taking care of myself and my younger sister fairly young because my parents were incapable of doing it, so I had to mature pretty early. I got married and got pregnant with Haley when I was 18 and lost my mom when I was 19. And so it's been a rough life. I've been through some unspeakable things, but I always wanted to keep my faith because I don't have anything to lose if I keep that. There's been doubt here and there where I've really questioned what God was doing with my life, but I still wanted to find out. You know what I mean? So I stuck everything out, all the abuse from my past marriage and my parents and things like that, and I knew that there was something else going on that I wasn't aware of, that I wasn't seeing on the surface. So I stayed in church. I decided I was going to raise my girls in church, and whenever Sean and I started dating about 5 years ago, I told him, I was like, hey, look, I know I'm a little off, but I really do still go to church, and even though I don't lead the perfect life or whatnot, I still want to go, and he was up for it, so that was a big deal for me. And so we started going to Covered Bridge, and then that led us here to where we are, and yeah.
That's great. And so Savannah, on the phone, you gave me the longer version on the
Oh,
phone.
yeah, I have it's so much detail.
Yeah. So the pit for you was a crazy pit.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been in a lot of different pits in life and a lot of just roller coasters. So I'm just so impressed that you guys are here as a family. And so just kind of walk us through how you got into serving. Because when I first met you guys, I think you were serving here, and you were both glowing, and we were received so well as the new people. But how did you get into serving, and what do you find in serving and playing your role here at the church to be rewarding?
So I started serving in the children's ministry, and I loved it. Like you said, I have two little girls. I've got Haley, who's 9, and Jade, who's 4. And I started serving there and really loved it. And when I started falling into some real bad depression, I have 6 different mental illnesses, you guys. I'm sane, just not on paper. So once I started getting hit real hard with that and a lot of PTSD, excuse me, I wanted to take a step back, and then I got into serving with guest services and whatnot, which was a lot easier for me. There wasn't nearly as much on my plate, I feel like, so that's been fun, and I loved it because I get to serve with my husband every time, and you can't beat that. So it was really a way for me to kind of cope, where I can, in my mind, if I'm putting on this, hey, everyone knows me as a happy person. Sure. I am. I'm awesome to be around. Y'all know that. Yeah. I'm fun, and I'm funny, and so if I can make other people feel welcome and happy, and I can make other people laugh, I feel so much better. Yeah. So that's where that came into. Sure.
Well, it's a win-win.
It's a win-win, 100%.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, just a massive thank you to you two and your girls as well. I mean, your girls are always hugging me or something, right? So we just feel so welcome. But I love how even in the pits that you were in, and we talked about this earlier, just how many people think they can't come to church because they're not polished and perfect. Like, I've heard this from people before, like, oh, I'm not really a church person. My past is kind of rough. We all have issues, okay? I mean, I have a lot of issues in my life, and your story was just inspiring, I think, to so many people that have been through a lot of things. And you're here, and Jesus has saved you, and it's a great testimony of him. Thank you so much. It makes me feel good. Yeah. Well, hey, let's make some noise for Savannah and for Sean. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. And you can have a seat too. Awesome. You're the best. Thank you. You guys, hey, this is what a great example of serving in the church and actually playing their role. And so Savannah and Sean and you guys, we love you guys so much. But if you're thinking, hey, how can we get plugged in? And what can you do? COVID is odd. Maybe there's so many different alternative ways. And as the band comes up this morning, you guys, there's many different ways as far as behind the scenes, maybe even from home. There's ways you can just send out cards to people. So if you're thinking how you can play a role in God's story, send us an email. You can even comment in the comment section there as you're watching right now on the live stream. We want to give you some information, how you can play your role. But more information about On Track in the next few weeks. We'll give you information about how to sign up because we don't want to have probably more than 10 people in On Track at a time because it's a two-way. We want it to be a conversation as we get to know you. You get to know the leaders of the church, and we want to hear your story. But more information in the next couple weeks about how you can actually sign up for that. This morning, as we pause on the story of Joseph, which I'm excited to get back into again next week, but if you are in a pit, play a role. There's a way, and God can work through serving to help get you out of that pit in many different ways. This morning, let me pray for you. Jesus, thank you so much. Thank you for Savannah. Thank you for Sean. Thank you for the fact that they have bumps. They have had bumps on the road of life, God. And even in those pits, they still say, hey, we are going to play a role. We're going to serve. So Jesus, thank you for them. Thank you for anyone tuning in online who is in a pit, who's wrestling today about what to do, how to get out of this pit. God, give them encouragement. Have them find a way to serve you and to get involved. Jesus, we love you. And I pray this in your name. Amen.